What's up, Guru Nation? Let's demystify clinical research. Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Look, we're also doing Instagram Live. I'll get to the comments later. This one's going to be like, how there's been so many people asking me and Chris with DSCS Sweat Equity Investments. We actually have a site network / boutique CRO / consulting company / really like holding company. It holds Yuma clinical trials. We're trying to do a lot of like crazy things. It kind of evolved into this crazy idea over the years, and we've been doing this since 2013. But we probably do 7 to 10 potential client calls every week, and these are people that either have small sites, sometimes they're medium to large sites, and they just need help with, hey, we just want you guys to do our contracts and budgets, or hey, we just want you guys to do our source. But the majority of the time, I would say 80% of the time, it's, hey, we need help getting studies. And then probably half the time, it's, hey, we need like advice on how to get a principal investigator. And I think that's where you need to start. If you're looking to start a site, how to find a principal investigator. I mean, you can't start getting studies unless you have connections from somewhere else until you have a principal investigator. And yes, that does mean a medical doctor or a doctor of osteopathy. They do not have to be board certified, but board certified is preferable and ideal, I guess. But you can have a non-board certified MD be a PI or a DO. So this video is going to be how to find physicians that you can make your principal investigator, and then a little bit about how to keep them. And there's a lot of nuances here in between. And we have, by the way, like a 2-hour video on the blueprint for starting a site, opening a site, maintaining a site. But this is just going to be one little aspect, which is the most critical aspect, and it's also the most difficult aspect. And it's finding and keeping a PI. One of the reasons it's so difficult is because there is no real blueprint, and the strategies are going to change from individual to individual. The strategies are going to change both from who you're dealing with as your physician that you're approaching. So not every physician wants the same thing. And then the strategy changes based on your own, you, the site owner, what you're looking to do. So sometimes you reach negotiations or you can't agree on what the other wants, and vice versa. I think in those cases it's better just to move on, because the last thing you want is a situation where you're not getting what you want and neither is the other person, or like a one-sided arrangement. So this is a tough topic. I don't know why I picked it when I didn't have as much caffeine as I normally do, but maybe that's a good thing, so we can like settle down and kind of think about some of these details. So finding, identifying, right? The best way is your sphere of influence. So that, yes, that does include your own doctor that you go see. I hope you have a doctor that you see. Everyone needs one, even if you're healthy. And let's say you don't, or let's say you've exhausted that option, because that's only one, maybe two. Your sphere of influence. Okay, so your friends, your relatives, who's their clinician? Do they know anyone? Sometimes you might have to go a little bit more ancillary providers like nurse practitioners or physician assistants. Sometimes the networking goes down to medical assistants, CNAs, just whoever you know in the medical space can lead you in the right direction. When we started here in Yuma Clinical Trials, so I'll just use Yuma. I love Yuma Clinical Trials. I think this will be my last site. I do. Not because I don't think it's a lucrative business, but because I've been doing it for about 2 decades. And I think the next phase of my career is going to be in biotech. But Yuma Clinical Trials, it's like the blueprint for everything that I'm talking about on these videos. So the way I found this PI was indirectly through my sphere of influence. So my wife, I was talking to my wife, and we were driving around Yuma. We didn't even live here yet, but we came here to visit family. And I was just telling her, like, hey, you know what? Like, we were already thinking about moving here. We were actually already, we decided we were going to move here, but we didn't move yet. And I told her, I mean, if we can't find a doctor to do studies, like I can just work from home and do the DSCS stuff. Like I have plenty of stuff to keep me busy. I've got these videos, I've got the DSCS client stuff, I've got the CRO thing I'm building. So I told her, if it doesn't happen, like it's okay. And I was just talking to her. We were long road trip, kind of bored. And then she saw a billboard on the trip, and it was her childhood friend on the billboard. He's now a nurse practitioner. You guys know him if you watch the videos, Jaime Valles. She saw him. I didn't know who he was. I never met him. And she said, what about nurse practitioner? Does that work? I said, no, it's not like a PI, but the nurse practitioner could be a sub-I, and maybe they could point in the right direction. But why do you ask? And she said, well, I know Jaime. He's a childhood friend of mine. That billboard just reminded me of it, and he probably knows physicians. So we had a Zoom with Jaime like a few days later, myself and Chris and Jaime. Jaime was interested in doing this. Jaime was super connected in Yuma. So he told us where to go looking. And simultaneously, we did use email. So my wife email blasted already prior to this conversation with Jaime. She already email blasted like almost every doctor in Yuma. A few replied. I'm going to get into some of the meetings I had with them in this video. A few replied, but most didn't. I mean, what do you expect when you're cold emailing? Like, so shout out to my wife for doing that. She did that. I think it was like 100 providers that she mapped out and emailed them all. And a few replied. Well, after we talked to Jaime, he pointed us in like the right direction. And one of the doctors he mentioned, who happens to be our PI now, Dr. Smith, he mentioned him. And then I told my wife, and she said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I emailed him. And she checked her list. Yep, I did email him. He didn't reply back. And I said, okay, Dr. Smith, let me just take a chance, go on LinkedIn and see if I could find him. And this is why I have LinkedIn Premium. It doesn't just help me get new studies, but it could help me find new providers, right? In this case, principal investigator. So I took a chance. I just LinkedIn Premium message, something really short. Like, doctors, the first mistake I see you guys making that are looking to get physicians, you bombard them with details. The last thing they want, at least from your initial conversation, is a laundry list of like your requirements or like your introduction. They get pitched constantly. I kept mine really short. Hey, my name is Dan. I'm moving to Yuma from Orange County. I've done clinical research for over a decade, almost 2 decades. And I really think Yuma is a great market for this. It's like a paragraph. And then at the end I said, if you're interested, let me know. If you know anyone that might be interested, let me know. Very simple. Sent it. Took a few weeks, maybe even a month. He replied back out of the blue. I actually forgot I even did this. He replied back. So I was already like, well, let me just try this LinkedIn thing with the other doctors Jaime suggested. And it did work with one guy, and we're going to get into, without mentioning his name, like why we didn't work with him. But during this time, Dr. Smith did reply back. He just took I think it was like either somewhere from 3 to 6 weeks to get back to me. Out of the blue, for those that know Dr. Smith, he's just very short with his answers. So my strategy of sending the short paragraph was good because I know him now. He doesn't read long things. He replied back, what does it cost the patient? So I'm already thinking that even that short statement told me a lot about him. He didn't ask how much is in it for him, which, by the way, wouldn't have been a bad thing either. Like, there's some that will do that, and this is back to my point. Not every clinician's gonna want the same thing. But Dr. Smith was at a point where he's about to be retired, but he's got a large practice that he's outsourced to other providers too. So that it's like the private practice running itself. He really wanted alternative options for his patients, and those that get to know him, you see that like the patient experience and alternative for patients and the health outcomes of his patients is really important to him. And that was telling even from that one sentence that he replied back to me. What does it cost the patient? So then I replied back, I think it was 2 paragraphs. It cost them nothing. I should have pulled this up prior to this video, but maybe I'll send it to Daniel, and he'll throw the screenshot in there. But I basically said, cost them nothing. Matter of fact, they get paid. I can talk to you about it more. And he was interested. So we did a Zoom, and then we scheduled a time to meet face to face. So I'm going to come back to this, but I'm going to talk to you about, because in the meantime, other doctors were replying, but it didn't work out. And let me tell you a couple of the reasons why. The first one, it didn't work out. It was an easy one. He was an employee of the large hospital system out here, Yuma Regional Medical Center, and they are so restrictive, and you're going to run into this issue in your areas. This is why I'm telling you this story. You're going to run into this issue, and I mean, this is the way healthcare is headed in the United States. Everything's getting consolidated, large health systems. We can make a whole podcast on the pros and cons of that. Cliff notes, I think it's mostly bad. The good news is there's still a few providers out there that are independent. These are the ones you want to target. Okay, so the first one that replied back, hey, but I work for this Yuma Regional and they sign you to these restrictive contracts, so I don't think I can do it. And even if I were to say yes, we can't use the patients because the patients are technically their patients. And I already knew the hospital was like not going to want to work with us because they did their own research, although they only do oncology. And maybe in the future they'd be open to partnering with me, but I may be able to do this without them. That's another topic. So the first one didn't work out because of the large medical system got in the way. The point of this is you really want independent physicians, not just because if they work for a large system, they're probably going to restrict them, their hours and what they can do, but the patients. A lot of you guys and gals thinking about starting a site, you're not giving any thought to where you're going to get these patients from. Let me tell you, this Dr. Smith, this is like, it has a happy ending where it's a book we're still writing. Huge private practice. It's him and 10 other providers, but he's in charge. We still, guys, they have like 10,000 patients in their database. We still have a hard time getting patients randomized for a number of reasons. These protocols are very specific when it comes to the kind of patients they want. So if you do not get a PI, if you do not partner with a physician that has a database, you don't have a very good chance, in my opinion. I know other people watching saying, no, you can run ads. If ads were so successful, then why aren't sponsors just having a few PIs and running ads the whole time? They don't. 90% of trials are behind on enrollment. It might even be higher because of patient accrual. So these studies are complex. They try to make the IE criteria like very pristine, so only certain patients get in. It's really tough. So make sure you get yourself a PI that has a private practice and is not part of a large medical system, or if they don't, at the very minimum, make sure you get yourself a sub-investigator, someone like Jaime Valles, who's a nurse practitioner that does have a private practice. In our case, it's the inverse. Dr. Smith has a private practice, Jaime does not. So you got to get the patients from somewhere is the point. Okay. That was example number 1. You will encounter this. Be prepared for it. Example number 2, it almost worked out. It almost worked out. Independent, definitely not as big of a practice as Dr. Smith's, but independent. Not enough space in his office. I knew coming into Yuma that I did not want to risk having a lease for a place right away, because that sets you back a little bit. So I knew I wanted a physician with a private practice that had just enough space, which was really tough, just enough space for me to get started. I didn't need much. I needed just an office for the coordinators and then a place where the monitors can go every 6 weeks when the monitors come. And Dr. Smith had that. Matter of fact, we're still using the space. We had to move out of our coordinator office because they needed it for more providers. They're actually growing their practice, so they brought in 2 new nurse practitioners that took our space. So we have space in the attic upstairs. I'm going to do a video later, give you guys a tour of it. But we have the exam rooms that we can use when patients are there. So I didn't need space. I didn't need to come out of pocket and pay money for a lease right away when we don't have a study. You do not want, there's plenty of headwinds working against you when you're starting a site. So try to find a PI that has his own space, like enough space for you to get started. Try to work out a deal where you don't have to pay rent, at least up front. We're going to get into that right now towards the end. This other guy, he was private practice. He had a small database, but it was something doable, but not enough space. We could have still done it, but not enough. And so he had those 2 things going against him, and he was also an internal medicine doctor, which Dr. Smith was as well. And there were some things about this person that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, attitude-wise. Like, not a bad person, but just if I had to be picky, I went with Dr. Smith. The other guy, it probably could have worked too, but I think I have a much better chance. I have no doubt I made the right choice. All right, so if something's like in your gut, like, hey, I don't like this person, or maybe it's not that strong, because in my case it wasn't that strong. I actually liked him, but there's just something that's like I can't articulate it, but it doesn't feel right. That's kind of what it was with me and this person. So you're going to run into that too. Trust your gut. All right. Last thing you want to do is partner with someone that you're going to regret later. So once Dr. Smith agreed to come on board, I told him, look, I want to eventually make you a partner of Yuma Clinical Trials, which he is now. We made him a partner about a year into it. But I told him, I said, I've done this before and you've never done this. So you don't know if you like working with me. And quite honestly, vice versa. So let's just keep an independent contractor relationship. If you give me space that you're not using, I'll make it work. And we made it work. And so I gave him, I think it was 20% gross. So not net, guys. I know a lot of you guys are thinking, oh, well, let's do net. Don't do net. Don't mess around with these doctors, all right? Because we can manipulate net. The net profit, we can say we're spending whatever we want and then not pay them anything. That's not fair. In my opinion. There's people out there who say, no, it's fair. Okay, if you can make it happen, it's fair. 20% gross, I think, is fair. You can go higher. With one of my PIs, I have 50% gross. I think that's unfair on my end. I don't regret working with him because he's a really good PI as well. We're going to get into him next, but I'm not going to mention his name. But so we agreed on 20% with the caveat that, hey, it's a little on the low end of fair for you. And I was upfront with him. I said, it's on the low end of fair for you. And he was not doing this for money. He was really doing it as an alternative for his patients. And he also thought it was interesting. I said, but if you like the arrangement and I like, vice versa, I want to make you a part owner of Yuma Clinical Trials. So we made, about a year into it, his company, Up to Par Medical Center, a 25% owner in Yuma Clinical Trials. So now he's a partner. Now he shares in the profits. But he also gets, so the way I set it up, he introduced me to 2 specialists in the community so far. He's still, and one of the reasons why I like, and this is where you got to figure out, is this the right person you want to partner with? Not independent contractor with. Partner, like be a business partner on a corporation. Because that's more like a marriage. So the independent contractor thing was like dating. The corporation was like a marriage. And it wasn't until we knew for sure that we're the right match that I made him a partner. He now is incentivized to point me in the right direction for other providers in the community. And so he sent me to a dermatologist. I went to meet with a dermatologist. Huge private practice. Awesome dude. He's actually has experience in research from academia. He's still a professor at UC Irvine in California. He drives to Yuma and stays 1 week working on his practice in Yuma, the other week in California. And then he has nurse practitioners that kind of run his practice for him as well. So I met with him and I started the independent contractor thing too. But because he was a specialist and it was derm and he had the experience, so it was really easy to get studies. Matter of fact, the first studies I got for Yuma Clinical Trials were actually for him, that I offered him 50% gross. So just anytime a check came, half and half, I paid for my staff. It was just split the check 50-50. I did that for a number of reasons. In hindsight, I probably went a little too high, but I don't regret it because he's a good person to have on your team. It was easier to get studies for him. He also let us use his exam rooms, and we do have like drug storage there, but it's not enough space to actually like be there on a daily basis. I didn't think we could get as many studies for derm as we were able to. I thought derm is like, okay, a few studies a year. Why not? Most of my studies are going to be internal medicine. Well, the way it is working out right now, dermatology is really hot. So we are getting a bunch of studies for him. So in hindsight, I would have probably went a little lower. I would have went 40 to him, 60 to me. But, at the end of the day, it's just numbers. Like we can have a good partnership going long term. He also wanted to do an LLC. So what I did was we did a 50-50 LLC on dermatology site in Yuma. So Yuma Clinical Trials owns that LLC, and then his practice owns the rest. So Dr. Smith, because I made him an owner of Yuma Clinical Trials, he owns a piece of every specialist that we partner with. And this goes back to who you should target, specialist or not specialist. I really think unless you have in your mission statement for your site that you want to focus on a specific therapeutic area, that you start with an internal medicine physician because they are connected to all the specialists. So now Yuma Clinical Trials owns not just what we do with Dr. Smith, but half of what we do in dermatology. And then same exact setup with a psychiatrist, neurologist, but this psychiatrist has like zero space in his office. Like there's barely place to put the investigational product. But the psych studies, I have way more experience in the psych. So I have to be a rater. Jaime, I had to train him on how to be a rater. Those are very time-consuming studies that we went with 75%. So the PI got 25% ownership in this new LLC, for CNS studies, and Yuma clinical trials got 75. I actually think that is fair, considering the amount of work that goes into central nervous system type of studies. In the derm, I think it's even more, you can argue it's more fair 50-50, because there are no like scales that my staff really does. It's more the PI and his staff that do the scales, because we didn't have that much experience in derm. Matter of fact, we didn't have any experience in derm. So that's why I think the 50-50 was more fair in that case. And for the psychiatrist and neurologist, he's actually a dual specialist, 25-75. So Yuma Clinical Trials owns a piece of every specialist so far. And Dr. Smith, who started it all, he owns a part of all of it. And now we have to lease our own space, and we're looking for more specialists all the time. We're kind of running out of specialists because of the big hospital system here. They're buying up all the specialists. There's no independent gastroenterologist here. There's no independent OBGYN here. We're going to have to go to outside of Yuma, like 30 minutes outside in San Luis and Somerton, to try to find independent people. And we're going to work on it. We're just 2 years old. Matter of fact, we are 2 years old, like exactly this month. So that's the setup I did financially. There's also the cultivating the physicians. So when the PI tells you, yes, I'm interested, to when you actually get a study, that could be 3 months. That could be 4 months. That could be 6 months. They can't forget about you during this time. So what I did, I made it a purpose. I'm going to have a weekly meeting with you. And I know you're busy. I'm just going to show up to your office once a week, even if it's 5 minutes, just to say, hi, hey, here's what I'm doing. These are the studies I'm trying to get for you, so that you don't forget who I am. I don't tell them that, but I'm telling you, the viewer. You want to make that FaceTime matter, right? Just show up. If they don't want to do it, just show up anyways, so that they see that you're doing something. Because it's going to take 3 to 4 months to get that first study. Once you get that first study, it might take another 1 to 3 months to start screening patients. So again, now you got to, and now the doctors are starting to do some work. Like, hey, I had to sit for SSV. Now I have to sit for an SIV. And if you partner the way I did, they're not getting paid, right? So you want to be over communicate. My strategy is over communicating during this whole time. Hey, it's going to be worth it. Trust me, I wouldn't have been doing this for 2 decades if it's not worth it. It's going to be worth it. This and that. Okay. Finally, you start seeing patients. Hopefully you have a startup fee by now. I just gave my newest PI, which is the psychiatrist I was telling you about, his cut of our first startup payment. We were able to get a study relatively quickly with him, and we gave him, I just hand delivered him the first check. And I said, look, hopefully there's many more to come, God willing. And he's been so cool. All of them have been so cool. So it can work well for you. It just takes time. You got to be patient. You got to communicate to your clinician, to whoever is going to be your PI, that you got to be patient. It can happen if you do it the right way. And we're not done, and you're not done, and this is kind of the blueprint. I think retaining them is best. Once you find the right one, retaining them is best by making them a business partner. So having an LLC, but only do that when you're absolutely sure it's the right person. Retention is a lot harder, which is why I don't do it. Maintaining an independent contractor relationship. So figure out what they want. It's very important. But also make sure it lines up with what you want. This is how I find a PI. This is how I recommend you do it. Again, there's no blueprint because everyone's different. The PI and you. But this is the strategy I've used. It's worked. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Good luck. Catch y'all later. Instagram. I'll talk to you right now. Bye-bye.